Is it now it's recording.
There we go.
Now it's
all right.
My red button says it's recording.
Yep, same here.
Okay. All right.
We'll let it go.
All right. Want to welcome everybody and join in the chat. If you have a question, you can jump in. We can do 2 or 3 people at a time. And if you are watching this on YouTube, please like the channel and subscribe, and you'll get notices when we put new videos up. And we're here to help you, so don't feel bad about asking any kind of questions. We're going to basically talk about overwintering, checking your hive, things to do before, during winter, and early spring. So what I like to do is kind of lift the box up, make sure you have some weight to it. If you're real light and the bees are active, they're flying some, you can feed them some honey. And watch for the opening. You should have an entrance reducer in your hive. And if you have excessive cappings on the entrance, then check a little bit closer and see if they're just cappings or if they're robbing a hive out. If you're light on your stores, what you need to do is feed honey this time of the year or dry sugar. Now, if someone's got any questions, that part, we got the seat open. You can come in or you can type in the chat. And Liza is going to help us work way through this. I see Ed has joined us. And all the new people, welcome. I refreshed my thing, shut it down and refreshed so that I wouldn't have anything else running.
Okay, no, should be okay now.
I hope that's taking care of it.
All right, here's your first question, Don. I'll put it up.
All right. If you're mixing oils, be very careful when you're mixing them in the wintertime. And you're talking about, if so, bad syrup, also bad for the bees. I think what you need to do is mix your sugar water fairly strong, 2 to 3 to 1, and I would be very careful feeding any essence of oils in the wintertime.
Hey, Don, can you put the vinegar in there to kind of keep the sugar water from spoiling?
I would use no more than a drop or 2, but instead of the vinegar, I would use Clorox bleach.
Oh.
Just a few drops. Oh. Now that will sterilize it more. Your vinegar is going to maybe make it go a little bit bad.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Wintertime, you don't have the fermentation of your sugar water or your feed as much as you do, in the summertime when you have heat.
Yep. Okay. We had somebody trying to get in. It doesn't seem to be working.
I posted the link, as far as I know, in the Fat Bee Man group, so anybody can get on in.
Yep, I've posted it throughout all my bee groups as well.
Okay. Joe May coming in. Good evening, Joe.
How you doing, Don?
Oh, pretty good.
Got in them bees today. I've still got 12 hives. They all look good.
You must have learned a few tricks.
You must have learned a few things. They're still looking good. Hey, question. Say I run them mini nukes and I'm bred queens all summer long, and I get towards the end of fall and I sell the rest of the queens out. What's a good way to recycle them the resources in them mini nukes back into the other hives?
Well, the best thing to do, if the comb looks good and it's not stretched out, is to put a bar across your 8-frame hive in the middle. 2 of those frames will hang. If you put them together, endwise, they will make one complete frame. So you have a bar going across the center to support them. Run 8 in the front, 8 in the back, and you can store them that way in the wintertime.
Yeah. Well, I thought about you take a queen out and sell her late, you're going to have a lot of bees in there. Just take them bees out and shake in front of the other hives, and what gets bees gets bees.
Well, are you talking about you shouldn't be running mini nukes in the wintertime. You should be folding those up usually about the end of November.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm talking about. Close them up, though. When you take the last queen out, you still got bees left in it.
Well, yeah, well, you can dump those. What I would do is I would smoke them pretty heavy and then dump them in front of a hive. But you're going to have to be careful that, they don't kill a queen you got in there. I would pull the queen out, or I would cage the queen if you're going to dump all those in front of a hive. Leave her caged up until, 2 days. Then just reintroduce her. I wouldn't put any sugar candy in there. Let the bees feed the queen. They're more likely to accept it that way.
Yeah, okay. Hey, your feeder buckets, do you use 5-gallon buckets too, or just the 2.5-gallon buckets?
Well, I use whatever I get, but it's more convenient to do a 5-gallon bucket. And right now we get a lot of, I guess they're about a 4-gallon bucket, 2.5 to 4-gallon buckets. They're in between the size of a 2-gallon bucket and the 5.
Yeah.
They basically come from frosting buckets.
Yeah. How many holes you drilling in that to get that syrup? Does it fill them channels up around the bottom of the bucket or top of the bucket, I guess?
Well, it depends on what size drill bit you use. I would say suggest using the smallest drill bit or the next to the smallest drill bit in a standard drill bit set, and drill every other hole in them little reservoirs, and drill them down close to turn the bucket upside down and drill them towards the bottom. Don't drill them up too high. That way it acts like a little mini bird bath out there. So once the level gets up, it's not going to overflow.
Well, I don't know. Do you do more holes when you got thicker sugar, like feeding 2 to 1?
Well, now a lot of it, you got a trick question there. I mean, how many bees are you running? Is how many holes you put in. Myself, we put out a lot of bees quick, so I'm drilling every hole with a larger drill bit than I'm recommending. But we're hundreds of bees out there.
Yeah. Well, last year I drilled just like you say every other one or something, and it wouldn't fill the reservoirs up. The bees just get around the hole and just get 3 or 4 bees around the hole. It wouldn't go down in that reservoir. I thought I was doing something wrong.
Well, now when you're drilling the hole, you'll have to take your drill bit and pull a drill bit in and out several times to clean that hole. You might to leave a little plastic that's blocking that hole.
Nope. Okay. I'll try it. Can you get too many holes in it? It won't hold syrup in it?
It will hold syrup, but what you have to do is you're basically working on a vacuum system. If you put too many holes and it's too thin or watery, what's happening, it's going to lose vacuum. If you make a 1-to-1 in the springtime with every other hole, you shouldn't have a problem. Yeah. If you've got a good seal. There's a gasket that goes around the lid.
Right.
You have to take that gasket out and clean it good almost about every 3rd time. If you don't, it gets dirt or grit under it and allow it to gurgle on it. It loses vacuum.
Okay. Thank you, Don.
Okay. I think Stan is trying to get in, but he's having a poor signal.
There, Stan?
Chrissy?
I think someone's got some feedback going. They might be watching on YouTube at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think he's there. Okay, next up. Anybody?
I posted on my Fat Bee Man group. If you write them down so you don't get nervous when we get up here on camera. You can chat. You can type in the chat if you don't want to be on camera.
Goes back again.
Another question.
Joe decided to have another go at it.
I think of things. I try to write them down, but I've been busy today. Building mini nukes and mini nuke frames and checking bees. I've been busy. When you're making foundation, can you just dip the foundation and take it off in your other tank with the water? Could you just stack them up and save them and then just put them in the water, warm water again, and run them through the mill at a later date?
Yeah, I do that a lot of times. In fact, most of the time I'm doing classes, Here, we'll leave a dozen sheets in there, and then I just put in real warm water. I mean, almost to the point it's too hot to the touch. And leave them sitting there for about 4 or 5 minutes, and then they're pliable enough you can run them through the mill. In fact, a new student just bought one of my wax mills down there today, and it went up to Chatsworth, Georgia.
Well, I'm thinking about when I come down, I may already have my foundation on made and save us having to further meld her up.
What are you going to do when you get home? You're buying a wax mill. You got to
Well,
do
I'll
something
just
to
bring
do.
enough to practice down there.
Practice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Jim has got a question. One of his hives been less satisfactory in attitude. Well, if you're talking about the temperament of the hive, in the wintertime, they're going to be less productive than they are in the springtime, or active. On warm days, they should be coming out. Can you tell which person has got their mic open and is getting all that feedback?
Yeah, that was Lucifer's Legion. I muted him though. He should be out. He's gonna try calling from his cell phone though.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what might be having a problem with their system.
Pat had a question. What temp to keep that warming tank?
The warming tank, as far as dipping, to dip the sheets, the warming tank to keep your sheets warm, I like to go around 98 degrees, or pretty warm to the touch. The warmer you get that tank there, the thinner you can make your wax. The cooler you run it, it's getting more brittle. So if your basement is cool, you have a good chance of cracking foundation. So you got to kind of play it by ear. We run a heater down there so we don't get a chill.
Speaking of chill, Don, what's your weather down there today?
Well, today I was downstairs most of the day making wax. I think we was around 50-some, 57 maybe. But it was 26 this morning early.
Pretty cold there.
Yeah, well, we're going through that stage where it won't settle down till probably the end of February.
Okay, here's Jim again. Let's see.
He said it hit too soon. Limited activity, 45, 50 bees flying. I don't know where Jim's at, but it says Chesapeake bees. I guess he's up in the Northeast. The thing you have to watch about, people get anxious this time of the year, and they're in their hives and they're tinkering around and they cause more headaches. That's why I suggest just lifting the hive. If it feels like you got some weight, you don't need to get in there and start messing around.
Okay.
Oh, Ed's saying it's got commercial guys posting pictures of trees blooming. Actually, a couple days ago, we had pollen coming in here. So I don't know what was blooming. We got some weird things that bloom whenever the weather warms up. In fact, December, it gets cold, we've had dandelions blooming. And actually, I think there's a few dandelions out here today was blooming. So we're finding a couple locations down in Florida where we can make our splits December and January, and then we can bring them up to North Georgia and start selling nukes right out in 1st of March. But there's only one of me, and the more students I get and my son over here, we can go in different directions. Joe got all the way up to 70 now. He got ahead of me. Let's see who. I guess everybody is getting back just to listen.
Yeah, we got a lot of people
If you got a question, and you don't want to ask it, there's a chat box where you can type it in, and we'll see it, and we can answer the question. But I'm here to help you, and you don't ask us, we can't answer your question.
Sam and Barb want to know where you get your sugar.
Well, you can buy sugar if you look on the internet and just type in sugar brokers, and you buy number 2 sugar. It's actually, it ain't gonna hurt the bees. Number 2 sugar is either floor sweepings or overruns from bags they fill or bakeries. And sometimes it might have a little degree, but it's still good for the bees.
Ed, what kind of pictures are you looking for? The whole video chat will be on YouTube probably tomorrow or Monday at the latest.
Well, yeah. That's what we're doing. We're trying to save this up to put on. Now let's see. Someone's buying sugar for $3 a hundred. Well, I'll tell you one thing most people don't do is go to your local store and talk to the manager. A lot of sugar comes in on pallets, and if they got stock boys that break a bag, a lot of times they'll throw it into a big container, and you can buy that just next to nothing. It's just a matter of going around and talking to many of your stores.
John, how do you feel about the cane sugar versus the what's the, yeah, no, not the corn syrup, the what is it, the beets? They're getting the sugar from the beet.
Beet sugar? Beet sugar is basically just a darker sugar, and it doesn't hurt the bees. You have to do what you have to do as far as cost. Beet sugar is usually a darker stuff, and it's usually about half the price. I don't feed corn syrup. All corn syrup out there right now is GMO stuff, and it's all adulterated. It's not good if you want to make creams. I stopped using that back in the 70s. They used to call it batch 55, and it was kind of altered back then. I feed most of my honey back. Honey will do much better feeding bees. And 1 pound of honey is about equal to 20 to 25 pounds of sugar, because you don't have to feed supplements. It's got all the trace minerals that they need, the vitamins, and all the stuff that bees normally collect. Where sugar is basically a protein, it's just or a carbohydrate that's going to keep them alive is all it's going to be. They can live short periods of time on an extended diet of sugar, but honey will carry them much farther.
Okay. You see Jim's question there?
Jim, do you refer to growing degree days with? I don't understand what he's referring to, a growing degree days, check the point. Maybe he's referring to when do I start to do my queens. I don't raise queens till I have natural pollen coming in. And that might be what he's referring to there. So everything is based around the pollen. I don't prefer to feed artificial pollen to bees. A lot of people do it. I don't. I'm trying to run basically a chemical-free, as least amount of additives to put into those beehives as possibly can. Now, being that we're talking about overwintering, one thing I would suggest is if you have a 10-frame hive, an 8-frame hive, and you've got one super of honey on either one, it takes less honey to go through the winter if you put them in a single story than running a super of honey, because bees have to produce a certain amount of heat. And in order to do that, they're going to eat honey to create the heat. So it's basically like if you live in a 2-story house and you're not using your bedroom upstairs, you block them off to hold the heat down. So if you put them in a single story with a hive top feeder. Then if they feel like they're getting light, you can feed some of that honey back. But if you have super in there, you got more cubic inches the bees have to feed. Therefore, if you live up north and you put 2 supers on, thinking you've got twice as much honey, the bees are eating twice as much in order to make that same amount of heat. It's all the way through my whole philosophy of doing these YouTube videos. It's common sense. So I try to give you in a way you can think about it and ration it out.
Good analogy with the upper bedroom.
Well, I try to use things that people can relate to. And beekeeper wants to know, he runs 5 hives a year. How many nukes should he run so he don't have to buy bees? Well, basically, if you have 1 hive, you should have at least 2 empty nukes to 4 empty nukes, because bees are going to either split on you themselves, or you're going to have to manage them and make splits. Because when they get overpopulated or they get honey bound, they're going to draw queen cells.
Jeff, are you there?
Hi. My question is, what do you do about overpopulation and how do you prevent it?
Well, depends on what you're looking at as far as the beehive. When you say overpopulation, bees are only doing 2 things. They multiply and they store honey. When that box gets full and there's no place for the queen to lay, or they get overpopulated, they're going to draw cells. That's just natural. That's what nature is. So you have to kind of work with it.
How do I get rid of
Now, the smartest thing,
like
if you got queen cells, cut them and make more splits.
well, I can't make more splits right now, and I need to get rid of the bees. I don't know what to do. Should I just use a blowtorch or?
You got too many bees, you don't know what to do with them?
I'm not an expert in this field.
I'm sure.
I'm only doing this just because my grandpa has throughout his whole life, he's had a beehive business, and they would make and sell honey on the market. But he wants me to learn this all on my own, hands-on, before he will hand over the business.
Well, one thing I tell every student when they come here, you have to make mistakes if you want to learn. Even if I sit here and tell you exactly what to do, it's not going to help you one bit. You have to get your hands in there. You have to experience working those bees. So I would split the hive. Learn to make a split. Learn to recognize what a queen cell's doing.
My methods were more
through
practical at first. I used gasoline and fire. My second method was inseminating the beehive with my semen and clogging up the holes so they can't reap.
Okay, he's done.
What
All types.
in the world?
All types.
Good evening,
Hey Don, how you
Pete.
doing?
Oh, pretty
Have
good.
you ever used a cloak board?
Well, there's a lot of people try a lot of different things. I try to keep it as simple as possible. And there's no really need of it. That what they're trying to do is take a big hive and move the bees to one side or confine them. Now, if you stop and think about everything I do in my videos, I say 10 frame hive I don't use. I either use 5 frame or 8 frame. You're better off to make 2 5-frame nukes if you're talking about a cloak board. That way you got 2 hives. And going into November, going into up into February, everybody out there is telling you, I got 2 hives, I got 3 hives, and they're real weak. Everybody's telling them, combine them. That's not a good thing. I haven't combined a hive in 40 years. That's backing up. When you combine a hive, you've got a queen in each hive, there's a high risk that they're going to fight. One's going to kill the other. Or if they kill each other, you're in the middle of a winter with a hive that don't have a queen. So that's why I'm spending time to try to take people by the hand, explain what works and what don't work. And there's a lot of people out there who tell you some stupid stuff to see if you're going to do it. I listened to some people like that years ago, and I made mistakes.
Hey Keith, what are you looking to do, right?
But if you're
Well, I've used
Do we?
I've used a cloak board for at least a couple of years to raise queens, to move, get the queen down in the bottom and get a high level of bees up in the top, and then graft up in the top.
Okay. You've had good luck with that?
Yeah, pretty good.
That's good then. I've been wondering about using one of those myself too.
It's pretty simple because you don't really affect the hive a whole lot.
Right. Okay.
well, how many queens are you wanting to try to
Just
to
a
make?
couple of dozen.
And well, if you just lit them in a single story and don't do nothing with them, even if you run a 10-frame hive, in a 10-frame hive, single story, and you're pouring the feed to them, you're going to have 5 frames in there at least that's going to have a minimum of 1 to 15 cells. And by cutting cells is far better than grafting queens
Yeah.
all day long. That's more natural. It's a better queen.
Don, that was before I started using wax. I had a lot of plastic.
Right. Well, that's why I do videos and tell people if you got this plastic stuff, the best solution is to pull the frame. If you got multiple cells on it, you can't cut them. Set them in a queen castle, and then try to go back and catch them before all of them hatch. When you go in there, if you got 1 or 2 virgin queens walking around, you can take and put that virgin queen on your hand and put it on the entrance of a hive that doesn't have a queen, and literally walk in there. And if you catch it within the first 3 to 5 hours, they're not going to kill her because she doesn't have pheromones built up on her yet. They'll accept her as a neutral queen, especially if they're not, they don't have a queen. But now, there's a lot of ways to make queens. If you want to make a lot of queens, take a 5-frame box, put 1 frame right out of the center of any other hives, shake about 8 or 10 frames of bees, upside down, put lid in front of the box, shake about that many bees. You're going to have about 80% of those walk into that hive. As soon as they start to draw those queen cells out, because that's a frame in there, they're going to make their own queens. I take that frame out and move it to another box. Then I drop my grafts in there, and then I dump about 8 or 10 pounds more bees in that, in a 5-frame box. I've had a lot of students out here. After you dump 2 pounds or two-pound packages in there, they'll tell you they're not going to fit. You'd be surprised how they'll get in there, and the temperature will go up, and you'll get 100% graft. Making queens, there's a lot of ways to do it. So I'm dealing with people of all levels of education as far as making queens. And most people, they only need a 1 or 2 or a half a dozen, so I'm teaching them the easiest ways. But you can make several hundred queens without much effort at all.
Thanks, Don.
My whole thing is to teach each and every individual that has bees now to make their own queens so they don't have to buy bees or buy queens.
All right. Thanks, Keith.
Don, I've got another question. And
Okay.
don't get mad at me, but I had a couple of hives that starved out. I'm feeding outside. I had sugar on top of the frames, but they still starved out. There were no stores on the frames, and it just looked like it starved out. Went in 1 week, fine. The next week, starved out. How to prevent that?
Well, that's a broad question. But usually when a hive store is starved out, you get to a point in the hive, the bees, and there's nobody out there even talks about it. Once the hive reaches a certain point, they get demoralized. They lose that effort to stay alive. You can have honey right next to them. They just won't eat it. They just give up. Now, in cases like that, the queen could have got damaged. It might have been in there. You could have bumped the queen, and they know they can't make a new queen, or there's no drones in there. There's a lot of things. But if you got at least a pound of bees covering, say, a frame or 2 frames of bees, and you put dry sugar on there, there's enough moisture coming off of them bees to dampen that dry sugar enough that they'll get it. But if they're demoralized, they will not move to that honey. And I've seen that happen a lot of times, springtime in the fall, when you're trying to run a 5-frame box and let them make their own queen, time after time after time. And usually the 5th or 6th go round, you demoralize them. You gotta let them have a queen and lay in there for a little bit, or they just give up on it. Or the other way you have to do that is you have to add fresh nurse bees. So you can take a 5-frame hive and pull a queen out of it for about 5 to 6 weeks. Then you got to either add 1 pound to 3 pounds of bees, and you're going to get a percentage of them will be nurse bees. The older bees will fly back to the parent hive, but that hive is just like it starts over again. It gives them the will to live. It's like the beehive is like people. If you get a bunch of old people in there, they just give up. But if you got a lot of young people in there, they got better ideas. They get, they move you around. Let's go. Let's do this. Let's do that. Bees are similar to people. They're social.
Okay.
Even though I've had a couple of starve outs, this is my best year ever, Don, getting them through the winter.
Good to hear, Keith.
Well, the main thing in winter is your ventilation. Now, if you got a hive that you don't think it's demoralized, you can take and put some honey and maybe warm it up just a little bit with warm water. Set it in warm water, or set it in the microwave for about 20 seconds for like a 12-ounce ketchup container. Just warm it a little bit. Pull a frame out next to your cluster and turn it sideways and just spray warm honey in there and then set it next to the cluster. Sometimes that simple thing will take a hive that you think is on the skids and it'll make a miraculous turnaround. Now, another thing, I don't know, a lot of people, and I'm passing this on because it's happened to me. I was very inexperienced, 12, 13 years old, and I lived in Ohio, and I went out in January, and I looked at a hive. Here's a big old cluster of bees. They wasn't moving. So I kind of moved around a little bit with my finger, and they fell on the bottom board. I thought they was dead. So I dumped all the bees out on the ground, moved everything up into my father's garage. Well, about 11 or 12 o'clock, the sun come out and hit those bees. And I thought I seen them moving, but I thought, no, they can't be. They're dead. And I picked up a handful, and the heat of my hand and the sun on them, they started to move again. So bees, when they get to a certain temperature, it's like a bear. They go into a suspended state, and then they come back. So if you got a hive that looks like that, don't give up on it. Sometimes you can just, leave them out and they come back. I've had hives out here. Temperature dropped down 25, 20 degrees. You think the hive is dead. Be a cluster of bees in there the size of your fist. And then they bounce right back as soon as the weather comes up.
Anything else, Keith?
No, thanks, Don.
All right.
Okay.
All right. We got a couple of questions coming in.
All right. Let's see. Kari wants to know how to feed honey back. The best way to feed honey back is never dilute it with water. Always feed it the same way it come out of the hive. And feed it in a hive top feeder. And if your worst comes to worst, you can use that feeding system or ketchup bottle and feed it to the frame. Okay, I don't use bucket feeders from November up into about spring, because if the bees, if they're to a certain point, they won't fly out and getting it. And you have a concern about robin. If you look at some of the videos, I'm running 200 to 500 hives. And in the front part of my yard, there's 300 and some hives there. I have a drip line running in irrigation thing with water and honey coming out all the time. If you got enough coming out, you're not going to get robin. And one thing most people would never believe is if you got 15, 20 hives or 50 hives or whatever you got, and you got a serious robin problem, go around your bee yard and open the lid up, or if you got inner covers, take it all open and expose every single hive. The robbing will stop within less than 5 minutes. Because all them bees, they run back to protect their own hive.
Good to know. And another question for you.
Okay. Well, the signs of the bees, early spring, I watch for the pollen. When you see pollen coming in, they're not going to make any queens. They're not going to start making brood until they got pollen coming in. If you want to feed pollen substitute, that would be your thing. I try to keep everything here as clean as I can. I don't believe in feeding artificial pollen substitute. Or there's people that's buying pollen from other people and feeding it to your bee. You don't know where that pollen comes from. You don't have a history of it. You might be doing more harm than good.
Okay. I think we're caught up for now. Anybody else have any questions or want a video chat with Don?
Just jump on in there.
Got 28 people watching. Somebody's got to be having a question. Oh, we got 2 of them.
Okay, I'm back here. Oh, there.
We got Joe and we got Jamie. Hi, Jamie.
Can you hear me, Don?
Hey, Jamie, there's one of my students.
Can you hear me?
How you doing?
Doing good. Can you
I hear you.
Okay. Real quick, you were talking about that pollen and not feeding it if it came from somebody else. If you were to, can you save pollen if you trap it off yourself?
A man could take a child as a wife.
What is audio going on here?
Yeah, somebody got some feedback.
Don't know what that is.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I think we're...
Okay, go ahead.
If I collect pollen myself, can you
Right.
save that through the year and then feed it back later?
You can, but here's the thing a lot of people don't understand. If you collect pollen, how do you think the hive's going to do?
Yeah, it's going to restrict them.
Okay, there's always what I call give and take. They bring the pollen in to raise brood.
Okay.
If you start taking some of that away, they're going to cut back on their production. You got to figure out what do we want to do. If you want to make bees, leave them get all the pollen they want.
Okay.
That's the whole thing. If you want to sell pollen, then put pollen traps on. But
Okay.
you're going to run the risk of high beetle populations. Then you're going to run a nutritional thing too with the bees. Because you can have 10 hives in one row and go down the row and look at one hive. They might be bringing predominantly yellow pollen, and the one right next to it could be bringing half red and then half yellow. And the one maybe on the other end, they could be bringing yellow and some green. Every hive in that one row does not work the same plants.
Right. Okay.
These are, and Joe, I'm sure he's been out there watched his bees, and he could probably tell you the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. I want to get off here. Thanks.
Well, you can ask questions. I hear you stopped and talked to Wade, and you talked his legs off over there. Or did he talk your legs off?
He's gone.
Hey, Don,
Gone,
I was on these commercial pollinator bee sites. They're losing tons of bees.
Right.
You got any idea what their cause is? They say they're treating for real mites.
Well, I'm not personally seen them. I'm looking at secondhand information. And the one, Hackenberg, what I've seen him on TV, and I've seen the big, huge pile of dead bees. What you see and what I see is totally different things. And what the general public sees. Just from what I see on TV, Next time you see any of it, look at the frames you see on the pile. Look close at them. They're chocolate to black. That tells me that those frames haven't been changed out on a regular basis. Now, what does he do? He moves his bees from one end of the country to the other. Every fungicide out in these orchards is being used, and some pesticides is being collected and deposited in this comb. If you don't change the comb out, you are looking for problems. And I don't have the answer to CCD, but when you take the commercial beekeeper losing 50 to 70% of his bees, I have students coming here and I'm losing 1 to 4%. And that, a lot of it's because inexperience. They're going to kill bees. They're going to kill, well, they don't kill all the bees. They kill a queen, and if it's not attended to, that goes into losing the hive. But from what I've seen, he's got old comb. He's using plastic. He's using metal. He loses hives. I talked to a fellow in California about 5 years ago, and we talked for a long time. And he said, in California, where he grew up, for miles, as far as you could see, there was almond groves. But the ditches had weeds in them. They had all kind of things blooming. Now we have monoculture. We have 40 square miles in any direction, and only one thing grows. Now you create a nutritional problem. And you get different enzymes out there. They can't pick up trace minerals. There's only one thing that grows, almonds. So, that might be a cause. I'm not their doctor, I know what I'm doing here and the results I'm getting. I wouldn't waste my money on a wax mill if I didn't think that was good. And by cleaning wax on a regular basis, that's one step. Getting rid of plastic, I think, is another step. Getting rid of metal is another step. Getting rid of screen bottom boards, there's another step. Screen bottom boards, in my opinion, I think cause more problems than they actually are solving.
Yeah, I just want to get your thoughts on it.
Well, I base all my stuff, all my videos on common sense. Does that make common sense to you? What you've seen?
There's no doubt.
I mean, it's dark comb. I mean, if he was, or anybody was to basically rotate comb out and have a breeding program to follow, you can chase automatic dollar all the time you want. I mean, that's all they're worrying about. Chase dollar here, dollar there. They don't care what the bees are healthy or not. They're looking at the bottom line. If you don't take the time to take care of your tools or take care of your bees, which are your tools, they're not going to take care of you.
Well, it's a fact. When you get new wax in there, that's where the queen will be.
Yeah, I preach all the time. I put a lot of stuff out there, probably too much. But if a person was a new beekeeper, looked at my videos, and only followed 5 to 10% of what I tell you that works, they're going to be successful. I mean, the stuff works, and you don't have to spend money.
I'll let somebody else talk.
All right, you have a question from Jim?
All right, using plastic foundation. I mean, that's another way to use the plastic to imprint that foundation. It's a stopgap method. I think I would start with just buy some foundation and cut it in strips, or just use a bar and wax it with real beeswax. Those are two options. Go ahead, Keith. You must have thought of something new.
I'm always thinking about bees, Don. Quick question for you.
Sure.
Which way do you point your beehives in south, north, east, or west, or does it matter? The opening of the hive.
Well, if you just talk to any of my students now, if Jamie's still out here, he's been here, he's walked my yard, and he'll tell you, they're facing any direction I have place to face them. The bees don't read these books these people put out.
That's what I thought.
I mean, and people's going to tell you got to take your hive 2 miles down the road. I have my hives, my rows are like 5 foot apart, and I'll make a split on one row and move it 4 foot back, or my stands might be 10 foot long or 12 foot long. I might move one from one end to the other end. There's a lot of BS out there in beekeeping. They're calling beekeeping, it's called BS.
Thanks, Don.
Sure.
John has a question. I want to make my own wax frames with small cells, and I looked at Man Lake and only saw one size. Where can I purchase small cell plastic so I can roll my wax?
I'm not sure because I don't deal in plastic, but I think there's a couple bee supply houses out there that sell. I think it's called Plasticell or Right Cell, and it actually looks like it's about a 1/4 inch long. You might try that, and then if you get your flat sheet, if you watch the videos I got up, you can make a flat sheet and put it between two frames that have Right Cell on them, and take a rolling pin. The wax has to be good and warm, and roll it back and forth. You're gonna get a slight imprint on it. It's better than nothing, maybe. But, think about the common sense of it. Bees, they don't stop and do that, and they go into a tree and they draw their own comb pretty well. So let the bees work. If you don't want to buy foundation, let them draw their own. A lot of people are doing it, calling it foundationless beekeeping. I think putting foundation, a starter strip in there, or a full sheet has much better
That's what
advantage.
I did this year, Don. I started half with the foundationless, and I checkerboarded them in between the ones that were already drawn, and they pulled it out beautifully. They did have the different size cells right on each one, so they did what they're supposed to do.
Right. If you got a good genetics of bees, they'll pretty much draw it themselves. And the reason that you want to put an empty frame or foundation starter strip between two drawn out is just give them a way to line up so that they can keep their bearings straight. If you had a box of nothing but empty frames, they would draw, but they might get some crisscrossing or brace comb or burr comb. It's just their way of just saying, you're not messing with this, and we're going to.
I've heard the horror stories of not putting in the a guide for them.
Well, a starter strip, you could put all starter strips in it. That's going to give them a bearing, but when you could put an absolute empty frame in between two that's drawn, and if there's a honey flow, or if you're feeding them, pretty much they're going to draw. Now, whether they draw small cell or large cell or drone comb, there's a variance there. If they're overpopulated and they're going to swarm, they're going to draw half of it in drone comb. That's their way of telling you we're ready to swarm in 3 weeks. Evening, Daryl. Haven't seen Daryl in months. He drove all the way over here from Arkansas just to shake my hand.
Can you hear us, Daryl?
You got your mic on?
Can you hear us?
Daryl? Can you hear us? He must not be able to hear us.
You better type your question out then, Daryl.
You need to chat it or check your mic, Daryl, see if it's working.
You should be able to hear us, though, at least. In the meantime, if you want to answer some of these questions, Don.
Okay. All right. Steve has got a question. Can I requeen small cell hive with a queen raised on large cell? And will they reject her? If they need a queen, they're not going to reject her, but they might have a bunch of crisscross comb in there or elongated comb. There's no guarantee how they're going to draw. I would put some new foundation in there and see what they're going to draw.
Okay, and let's see. There was a question. What is your thought on cut comb?
We do quite a bit of cut comb as far as, teaching the students how to do it. And I only use two size frames. I use a deep and I use a medium. And that way I can sell the medium as a medium nuke. or if it's above the brood chamber, I can cut the comb out. I cut it to fit the jars we put it in. We do it in pints, and we do it in quarts.
Do you fill it with honey then afterwards, or?
What I do, I take a cookie sheet and I lay a frame down on it sideways, and I take a knife and I cut it out. Then I trim the top and the bottom to make it look nice, and I cut 2-inch strips. And I take a cake spatula, I guess it is what they use for cake, and I put 2 pieces in a wide mouth jar, and then I take some honey that is a liquid honey off of a string or extracted, and I pour it across it. And I leave it sit for 24 hours, and I open it back up, and I take a teaspoon, and I skim off the small little pieces of wax. That way you have a good appearance as far as your comb honey. Now, we get $25 and $35 for comb honey in a quart.
Wow.
So,
that's pretty good.
And then Wade is another one of my students, and he does honey straws. And we got talking about that the other day when he was up here. He takes a gallon of honey, which people buy gallons of honey anywhere from $95 to $130 a gallon. Mm-hmm. He takes a gallon of that and he makes a little over $500 by putting them in honey straws. Now, you don't need nothing fancy. You can get on Amazon and you can buy these plastic sealers. You get one of those, you get a ketchup bottle, and you put your liquid honey in there. You seal 8 or 10 of your straws on one end, and you turn them up and you use a ketchup bottle. You fill the other end, and then you seal them with that plastic sealer. Wow. And you usually sell them 3 for $1. So a gallon of honey is going to give you a little over $500.
Wow.
The next thing you can do if you want to make comb honey is take, people say, you know, you're going to hear all kind of things. Goldenrod is no good. This honey's no good. There's no bad honey. I live in Georgia, and believe me, I know everybody's going to throw their hands up and say, impossible. I produce orange blossom honey here in the mountains of Georgia. There's no orange trees around here. I take my hive top feeder and I put Ross rounds over it, and I fill it with orange blossom honey. I get 2 full. They build up my brood fast. The excess, they put in comb honey in Ross rounds, and a Ross round contains 8 ounces of honey. 2 Ross rounds, $25. That's a pound of honey.
Wow.
And I can buy orange blossom honey for $1.40 a pound. So when you could take $1.40 and jump to $25, you've got a cost of 27 cents per unit to produce it. All I'm trying to say is, if you want to make money, I will give you different avenues that you don't have to make spend a lot of money. I'm not trying to sell nobody nothing. All I'm doing is giving my time, my education, and my mistakes to you. And hopefully we'll turn out a bunch of good beekeepers.
Hopefully. Always learning.
Hopefully. Well.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
Yep. Is it? Yeah.
Okay. Kenny has a question for you.
Okay. Do I give tours of my bee yard? That is a question I get calls all the time. I have a guy call me all the time, and here's the deal. I'm going to come down there. I'm going to do all your bull work just to see what you're doing. And I tell everybody, I'm not trying to be mean to them. I tell them, you want to come down, I charge you $100 a day to follow me around. I have certain days I will do a group. If I put tape over your mouth, tie your hands behind your back, you are in my way. So I have students that turn around and they pay me $500 to do my bull work. So, I mean, it's not that I'm trying to hurt anybody's feeling. I'm making a living. I'm teaching beekeeping. If you want to take a one-day class, $100, they got my attention. You know, I teach wax making, queens, whatever their person wants to know. So I hope people don't take it the wrong way. There's people that are experienced beekeepers and they see the techniques that I'm doing and they're going to ask questions. It's just, that's natural. So It's basically you're getting a one-day class. So go ahead.
Don, next week, what are you doing in your bee yard?
Well, if I'm not sleeping or sitting down, I'll probably be working. Right now, it's too cold. We've been doing wax classes and making foundation. In fact, one of the students come down from North Georgia today and actually bought one of my wax mills. So, and Carrie was on here just a little bit, or Jamie was on here, and he's one of my students. Joe May, he's going to come down. He's going to buy a wax mill. So I usually got something going on all the time. If we can't work outside and it's not too cold, we'll either be making lumber. I'm going to teach you how to saw logs up in the bee boxes, or I'm going to take lumber that we've already done, and I'm going to show you how to make bee boxes. And the way I teach is to show you how to get the most out of the wood and how to build them so that they're going to last you for years. And I go along and I explain all the little things about it. So, and then it's participation here. If you want to hang around and learn things, I would say the end of March or into April. If you've got any experience putting bees in and you want to take a class, all my students put packages in. I have people that are coming here, they buy packages. I try to show groups of 5 or 10 at a time how I put a package in, step by step, so that you can put them in. And in fact, I've done probably 5 videos on installing packages. Package that maybe, let's say you live up north and you ordered your packages in the fall. You don't know what the weather is going to be like when you get them. And here it is snowing outside. Now you got a package sitting there. It's dying while it's sitting in that package. Are you going to sit there and cry, or are you going to go outside and you're going to put it in the beehive? So I teach people how to put it in cold weather, and I try to teach the same people how to put it in warm weather. That's why I do these videos. You put the queen cage between the frame facing down on warmer weather. On cold weather, you put it on top of the frames crossways with the screen facing up. Now, why would you think we do that? You have any idea?
Rise.
Right. Now, if you put them between the frames and the temperature drops drastically, the distance between the frames is all the bees can be around that queen cage to keep them warm. But if you put it crossways, where the weather you know is going to drop, screen's facing up, those bees will make a big, huge ball above her and around her and keep her warm. That's something I've learned a long time ago, and I've done videos to help people because of that. And if I can have one person that said, all right, I've done it, and it's actually saved my bee. I've had people that say they know how to put packages in. They'll take a 10-frame hive, they'll pull 4 frames out, they'll set the queen cage between the frame, and then they expect the bees are going to climb out of that cage over to the queen. When the temperature gets to a certain point, they do what bees do. They cluster. They'll cluster inside that cage, and if there's no bees over there on that queen, she's going to get chilled and die during the night. That's why a lot of people put stuff out there. If you listen to it, watch it, reason things out, you can see what works and what won't work. And that's another reason why I'm doing these chats. So if you're thinking of something, put it out there. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you, I don't have the answers to everything. All I'm doing is relating where I've made my mistakes and hope you don't make them. All right, Kari has got a, what do you do with hives that has absconded? Well, I mean, you're talking several different things that could happen. If the hive is absconded, there's a reason they left. You either got a high mite count, they're starving, or you damaged the queen. I mean, there's so many ways to look at it. But if you're looking at salvaging a hive, depending where you live, you could put it in a freezer. I would not put them in garbage bags if people are thinking about that, because what's going to happen is they're going to mold on you. If they mold, you're going to put a bacteria in the hive and a fungus that you don't want. You're better off either freeze them or to cross stack them in your garage. In the wintertime, you're not going to have to worry about wax moth. Wax moth The old beekeepers had a philosophy of when the leaves are starting to green till the time the leaves are falling. Those are the times you have to worry the most about wax moth. So in the wintertime, wax moth is not a big problem.
Carrie's actually a neighbor of mine down, and she, the weather up here has been pretty cold, so freezing in her garage is what they've been doing.
Yeah. As long as you got them up off the floor, I wouldn't worry about them. And if the hive has not had disease that you know of it, I would dump a package in on either the old comb, then you have honey, and try to reuse it. I'm just different. If a hive dies or absconds, I don't reuse the wax. I milled everything down. I start every year with new stuff. That's just me. But there's many a person that does it. All right. John wants to know, is it worth getting into Ross Browns since the frames are so expensive? Well, I mean, you have to look at what you want. If you got a super, I'm using 8 frames and I'm making $300 to $350 per super, even if the frames are expensive at $50 a super, when you sell 2 rounds out of there, you're already $100 a head. Comb honey is at a premium, and Ross rounds is at a more premium than hog halves or anything else. Now, your biggest advantage on Ross rounds over hog halves is on Ross rounds, if you pull out, say, the center 4 frames and they're sealed, you can pull them out, add new foundation, and put it back. Hog halves is plastic frames, and when you go to cut any of it, and then you go to put it back, it won't work. So those are the things to think about. Good evening, Daryl. You got your mic working? I guess he ain't got his mic working.
Can you hear us?
I'm starting to hear a little.
It sounds like a chipmunk from here. I can't understand that.
Lag in the signal. We don't understand you.
Somebody else had a question. Sheffy had a question. What are your thoughts on Russians living in northern Michigan? Our seasons are short, and it has me considering them.
Well, Russian has good qualities, and they also got bad qualities. And if you look at the videos, I have ladies out here working in shorts and flip-flops. I want bees that people can work. Russian, first of all, they're very flighty. They're very aggressive. I had Russians here that was purebred. Now, there's about 6 different lines of Russian, and I've tried 2 or 3. They're too aggressive for a bunch of people. I have people come with their children, young boys and young girls that want to learn beekeeping. The benefits doesn't outweigh what you have to put up with. Now, if you're going to just set bees out in some farmer's field and you want Russians, they're probably a little better, but I would say the best choice would be get the red carney or get the black carney, and you'll be a lot more happier. Far better than Italian bees. Italian bees don't seem to have enough sense to stop. Your carney and your Russian bee, the queens are basically regulated by pollen coming in. If there's pollen starts to drop off and it's not as heavy, the queen slows down a little. She'll regulate that hive. But Italians, if any nectar's coming in, anything at all, those bees go wide open and they don't have enough sense to slow down. And they usually starve out during the winter. So that's where the beekeeper comes in, and they have to kind of regulate what's going
on. Don,
and no one's mentioned the Caucasian bee. Caucasian bees, we've had 3 people already ask about comb honey. Caucasian bees, a lot of beekeepers don't like them. The drawback of Caucasian bees is they like to glue everything up. But the trade-off is they make super white wax, and it's very good for comb honey. So you have to figure out what you want from the bees. If you want honey production, if you're wanting to make nukes and sell them, if you want queens, kind of tailor yourself around that type of bee. But I don't suggest run purebreds. I like to have a mixture of different genetics. You have a more well-rounded bee that's going to go through the winter a whole lot better.
Mutts are a good thing.
Yep.
All right, you got a question from John there.
Let's see, where's John? Okay. If you purchase raw sawed lumber to plant, you have to, I guess he means plane the boards before using them. All right. Here's the thing. They don't do nothing in a tree. They like a rough surface. I saw a lot of lumber myself, and I saw it right at 3/4, and sometimes it runs 13/16 plus. If you're worried about appearance, I set my planer right at 3/4. I run one side, and I'm only planing in order to just for the paint to adhere to better. These actually do much better on a rough surface inside than they do a smooth surface. But it's basically cosmetic to a lot of people. I've even worked with a guy that used full 2x stuff, which was 1.5 by 1.5, a 10 or 12-inch boards, and he made his own rabbit by piece of wood, and he was using it as insulation up in the northern part of the country. The hive don't look pretty, it's heavy, but bees was surviving. And until I got up there and got talking with him, and I told him you need more ventilation, he was losing some because of the ventilation. They was getting the wood could not evaporate condensation from the bees breathing in there. That's the biggest thing that's killing your bees. Go ahead, Keith. You thought of another one.
Don, do you use drone frames? And if you do, where?
Well, there's a lot of people that say use drone. There's two ways that they're doing it. The colleges are telling you if you want to do natural beekeeping and take care of Rolamites naturally, to put a couple frames of drone combing. Unless you're making queens, I think that's a waste of resources. I've done videos and explained the bees know more than we do. If they need drones, they make drones. They'll chew the wax down and make enough drones for the population there. And I don't believe in drone congregation areas. And I've done a video or two on that there. Everything is basically common sense, ration it out. Drones are basically, they're selling, put the drone combing because the Varroa prefers the larger cell. If you put regular combing there, small cell, you already eliminate that problem. So unless you're producing queens, you don't need additional drones. And most every hive you got is going to have enough drones in it.
Okay, thanks, Don.
Okay.
Got a question?
Well, we carrying a good amount of people tonight. Between 25 and right now we're showing like 32.
32, yeah.
I think that's a good thing. At least I'm not boring no one tonight.
Not yet.
Not yet.
I got a question from Ed about the carnies.
Okay. What's the difference between? Well, it's basically the coloration. The actual way the bees work is basically the same. It's like some people prefer a black dog, some people prefer a white dog. There's some people like multicolored dogs. It's basically a beekeeper preference is all that is. Joe thought of another one.
When you're using the starter strip, can you just put a full foundation on one side, starter strip, and foundation, they'll draw all right? Or do you have to have drawed comb on both sides?
Now, that depends when you're doing it. If you're doing it early spring and there's a good honey flow, you could use all starter strips. You're just losing more time and you're using more resources. But if you're doing it midsummer and there's not enough honey coming in, or if there's not enough, you're feeding them, they're going to draw it spotty. They might even end up drawing more of a drone comb. So, I hope that answers your question. If you're trying to save money, use a starter strip. You're going to pay one place or you're going to pay another. If you do the starter strips and there's no honey flow coming, you're going to put sugar to them. And then if you want to make money selling bees, that is the window of opportunity. You stop and think about it, you got a short starter strip and you got a full sheet. The full sheet that's embossed, the queen will lay the egg in that embossed spot. The bees will draw the cell out around that egg as it's developing. Where a starter strip, she has to wait till it's drawn down. So that is what I call window of opportunity. It puts you down the road anywhere from a week to 2 weeks.
Okay, I understand.
That's the simplest way to look at it. What do you want to do? If you want to sell nukes, you want to turn nukes quicker, I would use full sheets. Now, you probably hear me talking about I'm killing the honey flow. When there's too darn much honey coming in, I'm going to just drop empty frames, every other frame in there. Empty, no starter strip, nothing. Because I don't care. I want them to use honey to draw wax. If it's good honey, it's sealed good, I'm going to cut it out and sell it as comb. If it's partly capped or don't look good or it's dark honey, I'm going to cut it out, melt it, let the bees rob it out, and we'll melt the wax down. To me, the wax is worth more than the honey. So there's different ways you can look at it.
Well, I've got you figured out on cutting out the honey supers, not saving any honey, because you need wax.
I need the wax. That's right.
Thanks, Don.
Okay. Well, it's 9:07. I'm gonna give a final call or two here. If you've got a question, now's the time to jump it in there.
Daryl had a question for you on the sugar water. When do you start feeding?
Okay. From November to February, I don't feed sugar water. I try to use honey or dry sugar. Those are the two things. Springtime, when you see pollen coming in, then if you want to stimulate the queen, then you feed a 1-to-1. If you're drawing comb, I like to feed 2-to-1 or honey.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions? Want to jump on?
I see there's one of my students, Flippin' Bee Company. That's James. He must have
He's
jumped in
been
here
trying to
with
get
his cell
on.
phone.
He hasn't been able to do the video.
Oh. Well, I think he's using a
Should still be able to do
smartphone.
it.
Yeah. Now, there's one of my students that it bought like I guess 3 or 4 nukes in about 8 or 10 packages, and jumped up to 50, some 60 in first year. So the things that work, and he sold a lot of bees last year, and what he can't sell, I sell for him. I see several people that's been students and stuff have jumped in here. Daryl's been trying to get in here. Now, he drove all the way down from Arkansas just to talk to me. I'm trying to save people to drive, get on here.
Anybody else? Final call.
Okay. Last call. James is trying to say something, I guess. All right. Do you feel like doing this again next month?
Yeah, we should. I should be around next week, I'm sure. Let's do it.
Okay. I don't want to push, everybody's, trying to get out there. I know it's taxing to a lot of people.
No, we'll talk about it during the week.
Okay.
All right.
All right, everybody. I appreciate you showing up, and thank you for showing up, and thank you, Liza.
Thank
And
you
everybody
all.
have a good evening. Okay.